The Fiat 500 that was introduced in 1957 went on from strength to strength as the Fiat 500 that most people remember from the 60s and 70s. It appealed to people because it was chic, because it was Italian, and because once again, although it was very small, very compact and very economical, it was a real car. It could be driven enthusiastically, it could be driven quickly within the limits of its performance. And people loved it. It had a character that appealed to people, which is very difficult to sum up, but is quite unmistakable. The success of the Fiat 500 meant that Fiat's next step was to produce a larger engine version called the Fiat 600, and it was worked upon by specialists like Carlo Abarth to produce a very, very potent rally car.
This is basically a Fiat 600D from 1966, which was transformed into a Fiat Abarth 1000 Berliner Corsa, which means racing saloon. It's a little car, it's got an awful lot of power, makes a disproportionately loud amount of noise, but it has lots of sophistication which is not immediately apparent. So I know it's got a 5-speed gearbox and a limited slip diff, and it's got double wishbone front suspension, so-called pendolare front suspension in Italian. Lots of things that you are not immediately obvious. So the character is, in the first place, hidden, but it's extremely quick. It's a real full-blooded Italian racing car in sheep's clothing. I saw an advert one day for a Lotus engine Fiat 600, which I thought was a wonderful idea. So I rang the bank and said, I want to buy this small car. And then he said, what sort of small car? I said, Fiat 600. He said, very sensible. And he lent me the money. And because I did leave out the detail that it had a 1600 engine hanging out of the back, and it was purely for sprinting and hill climbing and subsequently circuit racing. Carlo Abarth was a man who wanted to go motor racing, and he hit upon the idea of taking a very mundane car, i.e. the Fiat 600, which was produced to basically move the masses, and transform it to whatever degree the customer wanted. But he really did extract very, very good performance from what was, at the end of the day, real vin ordinaire. The rear end, which you will see is propped up, started in the early 60s with a view to getting rid of some heat, and it was propped up a few inches. And they discovered by chance the car actually went a bit faster. This is an aerodynamic issue. So by 64, the thing was horizontal and is apparently worth 6 or 7 kilometers an hour in top speed. It actually, with this type of engine, can't be closed anyhow. Abarths were terribly expensive. I remember in the price list I can tell you that in 1963 a twin cam 1 litre was 3,999 quid. An E-Type was 2,000. A full-blown racing version, this by the end of the decade, was over £10,000, which was huge amounts of money.
You might expect Fiat 5 and 600 material to be full of children, dogs, the paraphernalia of family life. In fact, that's not the case. The people in these are very chic, well-dressed adults. Ladies in cocktail dresses peer through the roofs of Fiat 500s. 4 adults dressed in suits pile into a car that is obviously ridiculously small.
The Fiat 600 was produced at 633 cc's with water-cooled engine and created a platform for other vehicles like the Fiat 600 Multipla, which was the taxi version. We call them MPVs today, and all sorts of manufacturers would tell you how wonderful they've invented this new idea. Well, it's rubbish, because Fiat produced it back in the late 50s on the Fiat 600 chassis, and you could move 7 people about. It's called the Fiat 600 Multipla. It was the first MPV. They should make more of it. They invented it.
Fiat had found that there were more and more lucrative pickings to be made at the smaller end of the car market. But they did have 1 or 2 flirtations with the larger end, which probably reached their zenith in the 60s with a Fiat 2300. This was
on the third, thereabouts, plus passengers, if you've got any, with no power steering. Parking it in confined spaces, you don't so much park it, I think you abandon it.
It couldn't compete in commercial terms. It simply extended the Fiat representation into a market that they were soon to make their own by a much closer involvement with Ferrari themselves. In 1967, Fiat produced the Fiat Dino. Fiat's progressively closer relationship with Ferrari, in fact, ended in them taking over completely. Although Fiat has taken over most of the rest of the Italian car industry, it's never indulged in badge engineering. It's never absorbed those companies so completely that they lose their identity. Lancias produced under Fiat ownership, Alfa Romeos produced under Fiat ownership, still remain recognisably different.
I think with the Fiat today, you have a wonderful range of vehicles, and I'm not being paid to say this by Fiat. And one of the things they identified was a need for a really small car. We have far too many cars on our roads. They take up too much room, they use up too much fuel. People who live in big cities don't want big cars, there's nowhere to park them. So they relaunched the 500 concept in the Cinquecento. And okay, it has a 900 or even larger engine, but it is a very small car. It has a personality, it's a cheeky looking car, it's good fun, it's environmentally friendly, it's good value for money, inexpensive to buy, does exactly what the original 500 and 600 set out to do.
The one thing the Fiat story lacks is drama. There aren't any cliffhanging moments because Fiat found a successful formula right at the beginning and carried on prospering on that formula ever since. There is a saying about Fiat that most people know that the French government owns Renault. Nobody knows who owns VW, but everyone knows that Fiat owns Italy.
Disaster bericht dadelijk over het onderzoek naar het in 1992 in de Bijlmermeer neergestorte El Al-vliegtuig. De oorzaak werd toegeschreven aan een afgescheurde motor, maar veel vragen blijven nog steeds onbeantwoord.